The 1999 NFL Draft was loaded with talent at quarterback. In fact, 5 QBs were taken in the first 12 picks of the draft. But it was the fourth of those 5 that caught the attention of the league early on. He had a cannon for an arm. He had a unique blend of size and speed that the NFL had rarely seen at the quarterback position. I'm Steven Jackson, and in this episode of Legends, we look back at the one and only career of Daunte Culpepper. From humble beginnings to someone who took the league by storm, and yes, got his roll on. Daunte Rashard Culpepper was born on January 28, 1977. At the time of his birth, Daunte's mother, Barbara Henderson, was serving time in prison for armed robbery. She arranged for Daunte to be adopted by Emma Lewis Culpepper, an employee at the correctional facility. Emma would raise him, and when she died in 2007, Daunte credited her for changing his life. "It was the best thing that happened to me," he said about being adopted. "I never really had a man in my life. She was my mother and my father." After leading Vanguard High to football state championships his senior year, throwing for over 3,000 yards and rushing for 600 more, Daunte was named Florida's Mr. Football in 1994. Huge college football programs wanted Daunte. Unfortunately, his struggles in the classroom limited his options. Still, one program believed in him. The University of Central Florida was so interested in Daunte that they offered to help him get better test scores with tutoring. It worked out for Daunte and UCF. In his very first game as a freshman starter, Daunte completed 20 of his 25 passes for 254 yards, 3 touchdowns and a win against Eastern Kentucky. By his junior year, the 6'4", 254-pound Daunte was rolling. He set 15 school records, completing 62.5% of his passes and threw for over 3,000 yards. He also accounted for 30 touchdowns, with 25 of those through the air and 5 on the ground. One of those was a 75-yard touchdown run against Kent State. Daunte's NFL prospect was bright, but he would go on to surprise many scouts by deciding to go back to college for his senior year. As he promised his mother, he would get his degree. After 4 years as a starter at University of Central Florida, he ended up with 30 school records, 15 of which they still stand today. He also broke Steve Young's 15-year-old NCAA record for completions, completing 73.6% of his passes in 1998. As the 1999 NFL Draft approached, Daunte was on everyone's radar as a member of one of the most highly talented classes of all time. It included Syracuse's Donovan McNabb, Kentucky's Tim Couch, Oregon's Akili Smith, and UCLA's Cade McNown. Culpepper was the 4th quarterback off the board, selected 11th overall by the Minnesota Vikings. Vikings coach Dennis Green gave Daunte a redshirt year to catch up to the speed of the NFL game and learn the playbook. It paid off. Daunte would go on to take over as the starter in the 2000 season. The season opener was a battle with Cade McNown, who was taken with the pick right after him in the NFL Draft. Culpepper dominated the second half, leading the Vikings back from a 20-9 deficit with 3 rushing touchdowns for a 30-27 win. A week later, Daunte connected with receiver Randy Moss for the first of what will be eventually 53 touchdowns between the two in a 13-7 win over Miami. With Culpepper and Moss leading the way, they would go on to have a 7-0 start to the season. The Vikings lost the final 3 games and entered the playoffs at 11-5 as the number 2 seed behind the 12-4 New York Giants. In his first career playoff game against the Saints, Daunte looked good. He threw for 302 yards and 3 touchdowns in a 31-16 win over New Orleans. But the next week they had to travel to New York to face the Giants in an NFC Championship game. They lost in a blowout, 41-0. Still, Daunte finished his first season as a Pro Bowl selection, led the league in touchdown passes with 33. He also had 7 rushing scores, and he threw for nearly 4,000 yards. Over the next 2 seasons, Daunte would go on to struggle, but in 2003, he would return to form. Daunte helped the Vikings to a 3-0 start, even though he suffered multiple back fractures in his Week 3 win over the Lions. He returned in Week 7 to beat the Denver Broncos and push Minnesota to 6-0. Although the Vikings would finish 1 game short of the division title and a playoff berth, Daunte earned his way back into the Pro Bowl and picked up votes for Comeback Player of the Year. But if 2003 was a comeback year, 2004 will be one to remember. He posted career highs with 379 completions, a completion percentage of 69.2, and 4,900 yards passing with 39 touchdowns. He was selected to the Pro Bowl for a third time and was runner-up for Offensive Player of the Year. And even though Minnesota went just 8-8, they made the playoffs as a wild card. They rolled into Green Bay in the first round and shocked the Packers with a 31-17 blowout win. Culpepper would throw 4 touchdown passes and didn't turn the ball over. Though they would go on to lose to the Eagles, the eventual NFC champions, things had looked up again for Daunte and the Vikings, but it wouldn't last long. On October 30 of 2005, Daunte took multiple hits after scrambling for a first down against the Carolina Panthers. He would end up with damage to 3 of his ligaments in his knee. His career would never be the same. Over the next several seasons, Daunte played for Miami, the Raiders, the Lions, and the Sacramento Lions of the United Football League. He eventually retired in 2011. Daunte finished his career with over 24,000 yards passing, 149 touchdown passes, and 34 rushing touchdowns, which is tied for 10th all-time among quarterbacks. Daunte Culpepper is one of those players. He leaves us wondering about how great he could have been. Like his mothers that wanted more for him, he wanted more for himself, forging a way that the NFL had never seen before. His size, his strength, and his arm strength. His talent is what makes us remember all those highlights he created. And for that, he's a legend.